Thank you for joining us today. We certainly appreciate your time today and taking some 45 minutes out of your day to join us. Today's topic is an interesting one, supplier responsibility, and we have two special guests with us today. But just before I introduce them, a couple of housekeeping items. The format for this webinar is a panel discussion, and we want this to be fairly interactive, so please type in any questions you have throughout the session into the chat or the question and answer box on GoToWebinar. Also, please note that the recording and the slides will be sent out after the session, so we'll get you all the information afterwards. So just to quickly introduce some of our speakers today. So firstly, I'm Vishal Patel. I'm moderator for today's session. I'm in marketing at TradeShift. And our two guests today are Josh Morrison and Mikkel Hipper-Brun. Josh is a seasoned accounts payable and purchasing professional with subject matter expertise in business systems, process improvement, supplier relationship management, and analytics. Josh has spent more than 15 years with Forbes' top 10 largest privately held company and held leadership roles with direct oversight of supplier relations, reporting analytics, indirect procurement, and procure-to-pay systems. And Josh has also served as functional lead for several major ERP implementation projects. Mikkel is one of TradeShift's co-founders, and he's also the SVP for Asia Pacific. Throughout his career, Mikkel has played an integral role in e-business innovation and adoption across public and private sectors. Today, he's very well known for his contributions as a leader and pioneer, really, of global infrastructure and standards for e-business. His career includes roles such as technical director for the PEPL project, which is Pan-European Public Procurement Online. He's also one of the chief architects behind the first ever electronic invoicing and P2P infrastructure for the Danish government. So over the years, Mikkel has served as a key member of several advisory and expert groups around e-procurement and electronic invoicing. So welcome, gentlemen, and today's topic is supplier responsibility. So just to get started on the first question here, supplier responsibility. I wanted to, just start off with a basic question for you guys, and would love to get your viewpoints on what supplier responsibility means to each of you. Maybe you can go first, Mikkel.
Yeah, thank you, Vishal. So for me, supplier responsibility is about balancing the business needs of the buying organization and their suppliers. So what I'm talking about is business needs like process optimization around purchasing, accounts payable, or logistics. It could also be around working capital optimization or product innovation. So what we have to realize, and what we understand, most of us, is that our suppliers may be very dependent on our business, and they do understand our desire to optimize these processes and innovate our products and services. However, their dependence also makes them very vulnerable to how we implement these changes. So to me, supplier responsibility boils down to being very transparent about that continuous change that you're implementing, and how you work with your suppliers in implementing it. It's about collaborating with your suppliers on change management rather than just overnight dictating a change in course. It's holistic thinking about your products and the whole supply chain behind it. It's understanding your buying power and how your buying power can have a direct impact on working conditions, supplier diversity, environment, etc. So the health of your business is, in effect, a reflection of the health of your supply chain.
Great. Thank you. Some good insights there. Over to you, Josh. What does supplier responsibility mean for you?
Yeah, thanks, Rochelle. And just to echo and build on a couple of those points, the collaboration and transparency are really key when we're talking about working with our suppliers. And when we talk about supplier responsibility, what comes to mind for me first is supplier accountability. And in my mind, that consists of really two separate components to managing something like that. First is taking a look to make sure that the supplier is actually performing up to the expectations of the company, and that they're working within the direct confines of the business relationship. Are they meeting the service levels that they agreed to? What do their errors look like? Are their deliveries of goods or services on time? How are their customer service ratings? Are they financially strong, etc. So that's sort of more of the hard, fast component. The second piece in my mind about supplier responsibility and accountability works really more outside of the direct relationship, focusing on more of an altruistic or more lofty business objective, such as CSR programs, green initiatives, looking at waste or recycling programs. There are big efforts out there to partner with suppliers that are either minority-owned, women-owned businesses, hub businesses, for example. So there's a lot of ways to work with your supplier base and to drive some of that accountability to that relationship. In either case, whether you're looking at the direct relationship or the indirect relationship, if an organization is considering formalizing any type of supplier responsibility effort, it should really consider employing some form of a supplier relationship management process in order to be able to track and manage those initiatives with their key supply chain partners.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. Some really good points there on supplier responsibility and sort of the different sides of supplier responsibility. One being holding suppliers accountable to business performance and financial goals that you have set forth, and also putting in place various codes and ethical and environmental goals that you'd like your suppliers to meet. So we'll get a little detailed on that later on. But for this next question is really for you, Josh, and you just talked about supplier relationship management, and I know you have some great experience in this area. Can you talk about how using a supplier relationship management process and using vendor master tools and supplier onboarding can be used to accomplish supplier responsibility goals?
Sure, yeah. So first of all, if we're looking at an SRM program, it's important to know that generally it's used to optimize the value chain, looking at end-to-end planning, ways to drive innovation and collaboration to that supplier-customer relationship. And also, again, looking at diversity and sustainability initiatives as well. A lot of companies look to employ an SRM program because it really gives them a competitive edge. Having a foresight with partnering with key suppliers to understand what types of challenges they might be facing before they actually arise, give both parties the opportunity to plan accordingly and to be able to strategically hedge against any type of risk or exposure. It's also important to understand that SRM is not for every supplier. I know folks who have been looking at SRM programs and they want to do a mass sweep of their supplier base, and it's just not reasonable. So it should be a very strategic program that's applied to either generally high volume or critical specialty suppliers. It also lends itself well to suppliers that serve multiple segments of a business to help assure that there's consistency in delivery of the goods and services. A couple other reasons. I've been doing some research ahead of this call and found a great ISM supply management and CAPS research study looking at organizations that did implement an SRM process. And there were some very common drivers behind that, but also some very common results that can be attained by working with an SRM program. For example, looking to create common goals with your suppliers is really kind of primary to an SRM program. And those goals could support growing revenue, increasing profitability, or driving efficiencies, as well as looking at process improvements, reducing errors and waste, and in some cases working collaboratively to develop new products and be first to market. Those components that I just listed is a very critical selling point to be able to onboard suppliers. A lot of suppliers that are out there will think about and hear about an SRM program, and the knee-jerk reaction is that it's a mechanism that will be used to slap them for errors. And it's very important in the supplier onboarding process to create a value proposition that will benefit both the buying and selling organizations. And being able to reduce errors and increase efficiencies, grow sales and increase profitability, those are common goals that everybody can kind of come around the table together on. Some of the results that are common out there resulting from an SRM program is companies will generally end up with a smaller but a higher performing supply base with a decreased total cost of ownership, which when you look at from a purchasing side, a relationship with a supplier isn't just about hard dollars and cents, but more of a total cost of ownership. And an SRM process allows you to look at both qualitative as well as quantitative aspects to continue to drive a more balanced approach to the relationship. Also common output is an increased visibility into the actual cost versus just price. So price is sort of this moving sales target, but when businesses collaborate, they can help to drive better pricing models to the market to help, again, grow volumes, but also decrease costs for the end customer. A couple other quick results that are really beneficial to organizations. To become a customer of choice in the market is something that a lot of large organizations are doing. They're doing that in an effort to hedge against uncertainty of pricing, both domestically as well as internationally. And raw goods and cost of service are so variable in the market that becoming a customer of choice gains a preferential treatment and partnership with key suppliers and allows them to be, have first benefit to first to market with new items as well as the availability of goods to the customer base. So just be sure if you're looking at an SRM, look at, if you're putting it together, do reach out to key stakeholders in the business, in your company, because you want to make sure that you understand what their pain points are and what they need to be able to run their organization better within the company. And of course, there are a number of different tools available out there to help with any variety of reporting, tracking, scorecarding tools. The key is to really find some sort of a platform, a mechanism that you can work well and collaborate together with your supplier base, so that way you do have the transparency and the collaboration that really is necessary to add value to that relationship.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. Some really good points there. Particularly like what you said about being the customer of choice. In this space, we typically talk about preferred suppliers and preferred supplier relationships. I like that the different perspective on it and flipping it around and talking about buying organizations, trying and putting effort into being a customer of choice. Just to add to some of your points, one example I recently read about was from Kellogg's, and how Kellogg's is now requiring some of its suppliers to report on carbon emissions. Now, this is part of Kellogg's pledge back in 2008 to reduce emissions by 15 to 20%. And incidentally, this pledge was coming from their chief sustainability officer. The company said that they'll report on those emissions and include climate and deforestation policies in the company's code of conduct for its suppliers. So it's laying out those goals, but it's also putting in place programs to help its suppliers figure out exactly how they can reduce their carbon footprint and carbon emissions. Moving on to the next question. Now, with this whole topic of supplier responsibility, there is a flip side to all of this, and that is treating suppliers fairly and supporting your supply chain. And Mikkel talked a little bit about this, but maybe you can add a little bit more about this other side of supplier responsibility. Mikkel?
Yeah, so the first aspect is, treating your suppliers fairly. So as I said initially, that the change is inevitable in our business relationships, and our suppliers, they understand this, but they would much rather prefer to be part of a continuous dialogue with you about those changes rather than being at the short end of the stick and just seeing a changed purchasing pattern from your side. So treating your strategic suppliers fairly is to keep communication lines open, because of course you can't do this with your entire supplier base, but your strategic suppliers, it's important that you establish a level of mutual trust via personal relationships, and I have learned to appreciate that working in China and Asia, where we have a development center, and I understand in that business environment how important it is to build these face-to-face relationships, and I think we can actually learn a lot from that also here in other regions of the world. So having these regular meetings and using that SRM program and two-way balance scorecards as tools is a key ingredient, as Just was mentioning, and building a joint multi-year business plan, understanding the environment and the strategic direction of your supplier is key, because then you may together be able to develop new capabilities and taking advantage of your suppliers' new expertise. And you also give them sufficient lead time for changes, and you can work with them talking about risk and risk mitigation. So that's sort of the treating them fairly. And then there's the aspect of helping them improve their financial performance. So a big topic for many buying organizations is working capital optimization, and your desire to optimize your working capital may also be an opportunity for them rather than a painful experience. And this is something we actually see happening with some of our clients that are starting to implement supply chain financing or dynamic discounting programs. It's helping the buying organization maybe increase the DPO, but at the same time giving suppliers early payments. So it creates opportunities for both parties, and there are two winners in this. And the other aspect is going digital, because it's very hard to help suppliers improve financial performance without implementing new technology. So if you're doing business on paper, it's practically impossible to scale out any supply chain financing programs or dynamic discounting programs, because it's a very labor intensive thing for your financial partners, for the banks to actually offer the funding to the suppliers. It needs to be automated. And the same thing applies to optimization in logistics processes and inventory management processes, again, affecting your suppliers a lot. So, and speaking about helping them to improve non-financial performance, so a key thing is that you should involve your suppliers in your technology decisions. You have an opportunity to be a leader and to inspire them and make similar changes in their supply chains. It can have a rippling effect. And this is something we also see for organizations that have implemented Tradeshift, that the suppliers that are invited to e-invoicing programs with their buyers, they see the benefit, they see the opportunities for early payment, and they start implementing the same changes in their supply chains. So, but there's also a risk here. You might be creating a digital divide. So it's crucial that the technology you choose and implement can be used in the entire supply chain. That is not just something that you implement for your largest and only for your strategic suppliers, but that it scales to the full supply chain. So you have to take into consideration the technology choices, but also, of course, a cost is a key factor in these changes. So don't be the organization that widens the gap in the digital divide.
Great, thank you, Mikkel. Just at one point on that, I know you and I talked a little bit about accelerated payments to suppliers and how buying organizations, if they do implement such programs, they should also understand that once these programs are stopped or slowed down, that the suppliers should be given enough notice so that they're not, because in some cases suppliers might be overly dependent on the accelerated payments, and taking that away immediately might have a bad consequence to suppliers. So to keep that in mind and help manage the change from the supplier's perspective.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. There are some really bad examples of programs like that being terminated, and it was not something that you would have expected to have such effect on your suppliers. But they, once they start drinking the Kool-Aid, then you have to be very careful what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, anything to add from your perspective on this other side of supplier responsibility?
Yeah, just a couple points. First, just to echo Mikkel's comments on the use of technology. From an end user perspective, I think it's absolutely critical to find a good technology today. If you're not doing it, you're going to be in big trouble quickly. And the impact it can have upstream and downstream in the supply chain, I think is something that a lot of businesses are yet to realize. So those are really that was a really great point I want to stress. Just another piece from my experience when I think about treating suppliers fairly. Again, it comes back to me looking at some accountability. And what that means is, in order to treat them fairly, we need to make sure that both the buying and selling organization are doing what they're expected. And in order to do that, you have to take bias out of any other relationship. I mean, you could have had a 20-year relationship with a certain good or service provider, but if they're no longer performing up to expectation, or if their prices are increasing dramatically, it's not your prior history with them is not a reason to continue doing business with them in the future. Certainly a good reason to use something like an SRM process to give them an opportunity to improve on those concerns. But from a fairness perspective, you have to remain unbiased, and you have to be able to work on the same level with all of your suppliers. Otherwise, organizations leave themselves exposed to the risk of underperformance from their suppliers, non-contracted handshake agreements, which can't be supported, Again, price increases or any other type of unanticipated exposure areas. Also from a strategic sourcing standpoint, which is where we're looking at new service providers to figure out who to do business with in the future. Again, the supplier selection should be based solely on the ability of that buyer, of that supplier, to meet the business need, and again, not based on anything that they've done before in the past, or the fact that we've gone golfing before, or we send you gift baskets every year. In order to really be fair with your suppliers, you have to treat them, on an equal platform, with an equal opportunity to be successful for your organization. One example that comes to mind, there was a company that was working for a very long time with a waste and recycling company, a pretty major one out there in the market, and had been going for many, many years, thinking they were doing well because they started recycling with these folks and were going green and everything is great. But that company took an opportunity to look at waste and recycling as part of their purchasing and strategic sourcing function, and through transparent and collaborative relationships with suppliers, learned that there were other programs available that would actually not charge for recycling, but would actually purchase certain types of goods to refabricate and resell in a secondary market. Those types of opportunities could never be realized if we just rested on our laurels and didn't give new folks in the market the ability to come to the table and tell us what they can do for our business. So I would just stress that, hold folks accountable, and that's just not suppliers, that's within your own organization. And treat folks fairly and give everyone an equal opportunity to work with your business.
Okay, great. Thank you, Josh and Mikko. The last question for now from me is if there's any advice that you both can give to companies looking to improve transparency within their supply chain. Please share any advice you can provide for better transparency within the supply chain. Mikko?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned before, establishing that trust relationship with your suppliers is really critical. You need to be very transparent about your business, and of course you can only do that once you have that trust relationship. For those strategic partners, work on establishing that joint multi-year business plan, and share your strategic desires in your business, and understand that business is social. So also embrace the solutions that cover some of the social aspects of doing business. So very often we see a business as something very mechanical. We do a sourcing process, we issue purchase orders, etc. But there are individuals, there are people behind these processes, and there are tools out there that allow you to handle both the social aspects as well as the hard business transactions in one solution. So, and furthermore, I think it's really important that when we make the technology decisions, that we choose solutions based on open standards and open interfaces. Otherwise, we'll force our strategic suppliers into proprietary solutions that will not be open for other of their strategic customers. So using those open standards and open interfaces, start sharing as much data as possible as you're comfortable with your suppliers. It will allow them to adjust their business and share it as early as possible. And furthermore, choose a solution that offers different options for different segments of your suppliers. There's a huge difference between the mom and pop shop around the corner and your strategic suppliers, but they're equally important and dependent on you. So make sure that your choices will bridge that gap.
Great, thank you. Any advice from you, Josh, on this topic?
Yeah, sure. So just to echo the collaboration piece there as well, come to the table and partner with your suppliers. Don't look at them as adversaries or someone on the opposite side of the negotiation table. Work with them to seek common ground and find what those goals are that are going to support both the buying and the selling objectives. Also, again, leverage technology wherever possible. It's a great practice nowadays. Look at shared supplier networks. There are platforms in the cloud that allow business partners to remain in sync, streamline, document the communication, and mitigate against errors or lost work or rework. If you're looking at a solution provider, again, I would look at something that is user-friendly, something that's, of course, affordable and cost-effective to the customer. It will help you to streamline your process, and also, very important, it has to be able to connect and interface, ideally with your legacy or your ERP system, so that way you can sync up all of your data and perform business analytics. And of course, if I could, the last piece of advice I would offer is implement an SRM. And I took a moment just to prepare a quick list of steps that I would recommend to get a supplier relationship management program together. So first and foremost, gain executive sponsorship. Without support from the top, it's not going to go anywhere. Start with a small number of pilots. Again, don't go for the big hitters like I spoke about earlier. Look out for folks that maybe already participate with other customers in SRM, and they can help you learn throughout the process as well. Look at the different software options, and as Nicole had said earlier in the call, work with them to help provide feedback on what the best solution will be for you, because you're both going to be using it. Look for some strategic opportunities, whether it's consolidating your supplier base, improving troubled or key relationships, or developing business in strategic areas. Something like this will give you the opportunity to really partner with these folks, but it's important to understand that the best laid plans always change, so remain agile, be ready to change based off of stakeholder needs or also stakeholder limitations. And then again, finally, expect all around from the buying and selling organization to find areas that need to be improved, and not only identify those areas, but be ready to step up and to make change within the organization, which is why executive sponsorship is so critical. I think that with those types of programs in place, it's really going to help with the transparency and the communication with the supplier base.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. Great list there for our audience. That's the end of the session for now. We'll go into questions for both of you from the audience. But just before we do that, I wanted to just give you a very brief overview of TradeShift. So just very quickly about TradeShift. TradeShift is a cloud-based platform that connects buyers and suppliers and enables them to transact and collaborate. We offer various solutions, including electronic invoicing, supplier management, collaborative workflow, all of which are mobile ready and are sort of designed to be very simple to use. TradeShift has already been successful in connecting a large number of trading partners around the world and is growing very rapidly. This next slide shows our global presence, and we service some fairly large global companies as well, as you can see on the bottom. We have some key partnerships that extend the number of businesses that the TradeShift network connects to. For example, Intuit, which is the maker of QuickBooks, and QuickBooks is used by over 5 million companies in the US and elsewhere in the world. That's just an example of one of our partnerships. We also have a growing team in China, as Mikkel mentioned, and Japan. So some great new markets that we're entering into. Lastly, just wanted to give you an idea of the trade shift approach that we take. So many solution providers in this space typically take a buyer-centric view. So creating solutions for the buyer, which often limits the value that is created for the supplier, and quite often makes onboarding suppliers onto such programs quite difficult. So TradeShift's mantra really is to take a balanced view and ensure that supplier value is created, and we do this by making available tools and information to the suppliers, allowing them to collaborate, communicate with all their customers on one platform, and of course suppliers are not charged fees at all for transactions. So that's all I wanted to share about TradeShift. I'll go into some questions that we received throughout today's presentation. The first question is probably for Josh first. Could you talk about supplier scorecard and how that can drive better pricing and decrease cost to the customer?
Sure. Well, the supplier scorecard by itself, first of all, you can have a two-way scorecard or a one-way scorecard. You can look at both the buying and selling organization or just the selling organization. I personally recommend a balanced approach, which gives you the ability to look at not only financial but also non-financial drivers. And what I would suggest is that working with your supplier, identifying common key goals in critical areas, again, both financial and non, will allow you to not only decrease costs, but also increase efficiencies, shorten cycle times, decrease overhead, which reduces the total cost of ownership. And whether it shows as a decrease in cost or an avoidance of a cost increase, or other types of deliverables, I think that the total cost of ownership is reduced, and that's how we should assess our success.
Great, thank you, Josh. Next question, maybe Mikkel, you can answer this one. Any examples that you can share that expose the vulnerability of companies that may not have supplier responsibility programs?
There are some really horrific examples out there where companies have exposed themselves. There is the fatal factory collapse at Rana Plaza in Bangladesh. There were 30 different clothing brands were found in the ruins, and they were all really put at risk there, and they were exposed to lots of criticism about worker conditions, etc. There are other examples with, for instance, Apple's issues with Foxconn and worker conditions there, but they have actually, made a huge effort to work on their supplier responsibility on the supplier responsibility front. There's a great web page from Apple talking into this subject. And there are also other examples. We saw a lot of it during the financial crisis, where many companies were changing their payment terms overnight, going from say 30 to 90-day payment terms, and that created an instant liquidity crisis all the way down in the supply chain. It had a rippling effect, and many profitable companies went out of business for no reason, where a more gradual change might have been given them time to adjust. So and of course this also affected the minority businesses out there. So again, I talked in about just being aware of the impact of the changes you make, and it's okay to make these changes, but involve your suppliers in these changes.
Thank you. Yeah, those are some pretty high-profile examples, and I would definitely encourage people to go to Apple's supplier responsibility page. There's a lot of good information not only from Apple but other third-party standards organizations that they work with, like will help to provide standards for example, labor and human rights and environmental standards that suppliers can abide by. One more question for Josh is this is an interesting question. Can you share a supplier's perspective of a supplier responsibility program that they are participating in?
Sure. There's one actually that comes immediately to mind, and it was actually in the cleaning and janitorial services industry. So there was a company I worked with that had partnered with their janitorial service that served all of their locations throughout the country. And through the SRM process, they discovered, in fact, that the supplier, unbeknownst to them, was providing not only inconsistent service, but also inconsistent pricing that was coming out of its local representatives. And it opened and it wasn't a fraudulent thing. It was a fact that they didn't have good collaboration tools internally. And it helped open the eyes to the supplier, and also as an end result across the board ended up decreasing pricing for the buying company because it wasn't paying spiked pricing any longer and was able to take advantage of a more consistent price point.
Excellent, thank you. I think we might have time for just one more quick question, and that is, what are the components of a supplier responsibility program? And I can share some insights on that. I did do some research on supplier responsibility programs, and I think that for most programs, there are a few different categories that you kind of want to have or establish a code of conduct and standards within. And those typically fall under an ethical category, health and safety category, social, and that's sort of labor, human rights category, and then environmental. That's where for example, the Kellogg's carbon emission requirement would fall under. So typically for most supplier responsibility programs, I've seen these as the major categories for suppliers to abide by a buying organization's requirements. Josh, do you have any other categories that you can think of, or Mikkel?
Yeah, from the buying side, I would think that adhering to regulatory and safety concerns is definitely an area. I think that green and environmental is a great area that folks are talking about now, but getting back to bare bones, talking about things, compliance and errors and quality is a huge focus for these types of programs, and really should be used. The success of those programs should be used then as a stepping stone to build environmental and green type of efforts.
Maybe just to reiterate what I said earlier, that joint multi-year business plan where you understand each party long-term plans and strategic direction is key. The whole governance structure around it, having regular meetings, aligning on goals and expectations. I think the balanced two-way scorecard is a great tool. Joint risk management plan, and working on avoidance and mitigations plan, etc. And just regular face-to-face communication is really key, and especially from my experience working in Asia Pacific, where there is, for instance, in China, there's a huge growing domestic market. If you don't have a good relationship with your suppliers, you're going to be competing for those suppliers in a growing domestic market, and so you better be there and be involved with your suppliers.
Some great points. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for your time. I'm going to wrap up quickly because we are a few minutes over time. Just wanted to remind you that the slides and recording will be sent out afterwards. And if you do have any questions after this, please do email us. We'll be happy to get back to you with answers. But again, thank you again for taking your time from your day, and hopefully this was helpful and informational for you.